Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Dais, a podcast about the stories taking place in and around El Paso County, Colorado. I'm your host, Scott Anderson, and today I am joined by the El Paso County Commissioner for District 3, Bill Wysong. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing very well, Scott. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, good. Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time today. Before we get started, though, I want to quickly add that if listeners are interested in more stories about people doing good in and around El Paso County, or hearing from county leadership about local government priorities and how they operate, you can find additional episodes of this podcast on your podcast platform of choice. But to get started today, Commissioner, I was wondering if you could start off by giving a bit of background about yourself prior to becoming a county commissioner.
Sure. Last year, prior to being elected, I was a building inspector. We did inspections for USDA rural housing. Prior to that, that was about a year. And then I spent 8 years as a home inspector. And prior to that, I worked about 8 years in a private water company, building equipment for both pharmaceutical and other types of industry. And then about 28 years in the telecommunications industry. So a very varied background.
Yeah, no kidding. Have you been here in Colorado Springs the whole time?
I moved here 39 years ago in 86, and that's pretty much started here with the telecommunications, and then pretty much continued to grow and work for different firms, and it's just been a very fun time living here in El Paso County.
That's great. So having this background in all of these different varied occupations, what led you to run? Like, what made you think county commissioner is the next step in my journey?
Well, it was unintentional. I survived the Waldo Canyon fire in June 26, 2012. And we had to experience a pretty horrific evacuation process. And then in around 2020, October, we were notified that the city was going to put in some large multifamily housing right at a critical evacuation junction that we experienced as having a tough time. So that kind of started the process of my real community involvement outside of our neighborhood. And since I was the president of Mountain Shadows Community Association at the time, I was delegated the person in charge, and we led a fight to stop the development. And we were ultimately successful after many failures. But in August of 21, we were successful. City Council voted to not approve that development. And that really kind of gave me the confidence when you're standing at the podium talking to people on the other side of the dais, when you get the questions and the looks and what have you. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the unintentional, because I had no desire at that particular time to be on the other side of the dais.
Right.
Instead of the city, I am now on the Board of County Commissioners, and I'm taking those elements of what I did and how I had to prepare to heart, and so that I understand that when you are on that other side of the dais, mm-hmm. It's kind of an interesting feeling.
Yeah.
And so I have that empathy for anyone that does present to the Board of Commissioners.
That's great. So what do you think that all of those failures taught you before you were successful? Because I think a lot of people experience that. Rarely do we get things right the first time, at least for me personally. It usually takes a couple rounds to try and get something right. So what do you think that helped teach you, and what do you think that helps you bring to this role?
Well, it's perseverance. I'm glad this is not TV, but you can judge by the color of my hair that I've been around the block 2 or 3 times. And so life can be very interesting at times. So failure is a tool in which to learn from and to grow. So those failures that we experienced in front of the City Planning Commission and even the City Council the first go around, it causes you to dig deeper, try harder, and do more research to be successful. And that's basically what we did. And we had a lot of help in the sense that it wasn't just the Mountain Shadows community, but we had help from other areas within the city. And because of that, we formed a nonprofit called West Side Watch. I was president of that and co-founder. And it was really just helping the various neighborhoods to have their voices heard, because that is the hardest thing to overcome, is not only in your local neighborhood to get people to acknowledge what's going on around them, but then to have either the city council and, in our case, Board of County Commissioners to take people seriously.
Mm-hmm. So you're now roughly 6 months into your first term as commissioner here with El Paso County. Talk to me about the things that tell me about how things have gone, generally speaking, and then a couple of things that maybe you were surprised to learn about the role.
Well, the 6 months have been a whirlwind of learning. The proverbial fire hose, but that's okay. What I found very interesting is that you may not retain all the information you were given, but like anything else, you know where to get the information. And just a little sidebar, we have an outstanding staff here that helps the county commissioners do their job. And without them, we would not be nearly as successful. And so that's first and foremost, something that needs to be said and repeated. The first couple of months with this great planning staff, after the election, 3 days later, we were supposed to have or begin our orientation. But due to the snowstorm that hit, dumped, 18 inches total for 3 or 4 days, got delayed a little bit. But that was really fun in the sense that we immediately were elected. So now we're commissioners-elect, but they treated us as one of them and really did a great job in allowing us to be exploratory with a lot of the major boards and departments within the county. So that gave us that opportunity to get that slow learn over a couple months before we were sworn in. And that was huge.
So you mentioned that you had some experience with the city on the other side of the fence, and now you're on the county on the elected side of the fence. Tell me a little bit about some of the differences between the two.
Well, the main thing is part of that process is learning the Robert's Rules of Order and just the various other members of the board that, what are their favorite questions? What did they ask? And then the process. So there's a lot of nuance to how the dais works. And Commissioner Geithner, our chair, does a great job in running the meetings and educating us on the side. Takes us aside and said, no, you need to do it this way.
Yeah.
And so, but learning how the process works behind the dais allows us to, especially with my experience of being on the other side, to help make those people, if needed, feel more comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can definitely be intimidating going to that podium in front of the entire board and, trying to speak up and say whatever it is you're going to say. So that it is nice to have been on that side and understand that and do what you can on your side to make it feel perhaps a little bit more accommodating.
Well, that is true. And that's our goal. It is not an opportunity to, really dig down deep and enforce the folks that are presenting, to make them feel uncomfortable.
Right.
It's just the opposite. Yeah. The whole idea is to make them feel comfortable and allow them to explain what their issues are. And if it's a presentation, to feel comfortable providing the information that they want to get across.
That's really great. So as we mentioned before, you have a lot of different types of experience before coming to this role. What do you think that you gained from all that previous experience that has helped you so far in these 6 months you've been here?
Well, a lot of my experience was in sales, and you learn how to get up in front of people and talk, but it's also just important, if not more, to listen to what your clients, or in this case our constituents, what they're asking for. So I had a lot of that opportunity preparatory. Before I really got into the business world, standing up in front of even a classroom just frightened me to no end.
Yeah. And
then just over time, you just say, okay, I've got this. And that is over the course of the number of years, just feeling very comfortable and, again, confident. If you know your material and you know what's coming up, then you can be very confident and comfortable explaining your position.
So you've mentioned a couple things that sound challenging to me, mostly all the information that you're trying to learn to fulfill the role. But what would you say has been the most challenging aspect of your role as commissioner so far?
Keeping ourselves organized. Again, I have to compliment our staff because they do everything in their power to make that happen. But every week, we have a completely different schedule. We meet every Tuesday for our board, every other Thursday for land use. But in between them, we have a number of meetings. I'm on 14 different boards and commissions, and they don't meet weekly. It's maybe once a month until there's some kind of a event like spring break or whatever it is, holiday week, where they move it up. And so now you're struggling to keep everything aligned. And so it's knowing when you're supposed to be at one of these boards, and then again, taking the time to read the material that is provided by whatever group it is, so you can be prepared.
Yeah, no, that's really great. And one of those things that I think can help give people that reassurance, I guess, that, the commissioners do all they can to prepare themselves for these meetings, to be educated. I think it can't really be overstated just how many things you are involved with. And so it can be really difficult to keep track of this land use issue, this, housing issue, this different board issue. Like you said, you're on 14 different boards. What are some of those boards and what are some of those experiences you've had with them?
Well, the first one that I wrote down was the Colorado Springs Urban Renewal Board. The board has 13 members, and one of those are one of the county commissioners. So I requested that and was granted that request. It's just understanding the uniqueness of urban renewal process. That they're trying to find money to help developers build whatever it is that they're going to build. The Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments, that's another unique board, and it covers multiple counties, not just El Paso County, and how, whether it be the transportation elements or just other impacts to the multiple counties. And it's a vehicle that the state uses to pass information and money through, depending on what the item is. Probably one of the favorite ones, I'm just in an advisory position on the parks, so I'm not actually on that board, but we help elect or appoint, I should say, board members to the park board. And that allows us to make sure that our parks are in good hands because they have a lot of responsibility in caring for those parks. And then I'm actually on 3 two boards and then also advisory as it deals with water and stormwater. So I'm on the Fountain Creek Watershed District, which was pretty much formed when the city wanted to put in the SDS pipeline because of a lot of issues with Fountain Creek and down as it ran down through Pueblo. And then the Pikes Peak Rural Water Authority. So those are kind of two different boards. However, they kind of have the same end goal, and that is managing the water that flows down Fountain Creek. And then an advisory role for the county and city drainage board, which a lot of the issues that we have on Fountain Creek is derived from stormwater. So this is all important areas that they're combined. And then the final is the Military Affairs Council. And the goal there is, El Paso County is a very veteran-centric county, close to 100,000 veterans and 30-some thousand, I believe, active duty personnel between the 5 different bases. And then Congressman Crank asked me to be on one of his boards, the Defense Advisory Board. And the subcommittee I'm on is dealing with base encroachment. And that ties in very nicely with our land use issues. Because if we have too much encroachment around our military bases, their missions are compromised, and all of a sudden we might be losing some of those capabilities. So that is a very fun board to be on.
All right. So I just want to recap this a little bit. So urban renewal, Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments. You mentioned an advisory position on the Parks Board, 3 boards for water and stormwater, Military Affairs Council, a Defense Advisory Board. Okay. That's a lot. I'm trying to wrap my head around this because whenever I hear this, and I mean, you mentioned earlier, it's like drinking through a fire hose. I am always fascinated to hear how people learn. I am glad that I got my bachelor's degree and don't have a desire to go back to school and learn anymore because it was really difficult for me. Learning was not something that just kind of came naturally like it does for perhaps some other people. But when you are essentially like fed all this information at once where, you're a part of all of these different things, complex things. I mean, again, even just water and stormwater, that's a really complex issue. Military affairs, I'm sure, is a very complex issue. I know nothing about it, so I'm not going to even try and talk about that. But how do you approach learning in this way where you are able to try and I guess like make up for some of that ground that you need to make up so you're on the same level with with people who have, probably been in these positions for a little while?
The key for me is that I'm a very visual learner, hands-on, and that did not suit me well in grade school and through high school. I just wasn't a student. Mm-hmm. I am a Navy vet, spent a few years in the Navy. That kind of helped, just maturity, reset things. Then graduated from University of Oregon. Also have my master's in business administration. And that all came about just by being able to kind of turn that leaf and be able to focus. Some people will laugh at me and say that, I'm killing a forest because I need everything printed out.
Okay, yeah.
Because I'll put sticky notes, I'll make comments. It allows me to keep track of items and issues versus something that's just, on the screen for a short moment, which allows me to retain that or at least go back and educate myself or re-educate myself on a particular topic. Mm-hmm. And, the more information you get, you've got to have a better filing system for retrieval. And again, it comes back, I can't say it enough, having a great county staff to help us, keeping us organized. So it's really, it's a process. It's learned. how to be organized, and I'm far from it. Just ask my wife. But it's a different environment, so the organization process is a little different.
Yeah, no, that's really great. Thank you for sharing that. So along with all of these different things that you are a part of, I think you have a really great privilege to have an understanding of where the county's going and, what we might be able to expect, in the coming months and years. In your opinion, what are some of those things that El Paso County residents should be paying close attention to in the near future?
Well, it's not direct, but our water issues, and also the reason why I'm on the 3 water and drainage board, is we've got to really understand what we're going to do with our water, wastewater, stormwater, so that we don't have issues downstream, and most importantly, we don't run out of water. We don't have any direct control over city water, because that's obviously the city of Colorado Springs and the city of utilities. However, when you're in unincorporated parts of the county, then you do have some of the water issues, which are at this point all wells. Now, whether it's a residential well or if it's a larger well to service an unincorporated part of an area, that is really important. And how much water we have, we don't know. We've got some studies that are going on that is being headed by our planning department to try to understand and get more information. But when you have multiple aquifers that go over a very large, wide area, and it's not just like a bowl, and that bowl is very uniform, and that's your water supply. It's not. It's underground. We have no idea what it truly looks like and how much water is there. So it's very important that we try to understand what water's there, how we can best conserve our water, whether it's reuse, and then you've got people that are downstream that, they need their allotted share of the water. So water is probably the most important issue. And then land use, especially as it pertains to our military. And then the big elephant in the room is housing. One of the things that I'll cover too is that the city and county are different. And it's, if you ask the, person on the streets, what does the county do, or county commissioner versus city council member, or just the county versus city? It is really unique in the sense that the city doesn't have a jail. They have a police department, and the county has a sheriff department, but the sheriff is responsible for the jail. And most of the power that the county gets are by state statute. So we're really, the county is kind of an extension of the state in many ways. Same with the DA. They're a separate entity, but they're kind of a county DA. In our case, 4th Judicial District is both El Paso and Teller. Our clerk and recorder, they take care of the elections and DMV, but the DMV really is tied to the state. So there's a lot of give and take within the county as it relates to the state. City doesn't have a coroner. The coroner is a county position. Treasurer, they collect the money. We also have an assessor. They're the real popular ones when they send out the valuation notice of your property. And it's like
popular is a relative term here.
Well, it depends. Everything went up really fast, and in some areas, the pricing is stabilizing or dropping a little bit. It really kind of depends. Yeah. And then we have a county surveyor. And the key thing there is all 7 of those departments are led by an elected official. So we don't have any direct say in how those departments are run. However, we do control the budget. And so that is probably depending on which side you're on. With land use, the budget is the next major component that the county commissioners get involved in. The budgeting process has already started. It's done at a department level. In our county staff, they'll be meeting with everybody, including these other department heads, elected officials. And then we don't start seeing some of the combined budget until maybe the September time period. So that is a major issue, especially when everyone needs more money than we're willing to appropriate. And I think this is another important thing to say. El Paso County is the largest populous county in the state. And that catches a lot of people by surprise. But they think, well, Denver is. Well, Denver's actually pretty small, but they are heavily populated. I think they're number 2 or 3. But that whole metropolitan area is so dense. That is why people think that Denver, because they just kind of think that the Denver area. But when you have Aurora area or Adams County and a lot of these others, it does make a large population base. However, El Paso County, as a county itself, is 750,000 population. But the interesting part to all this, and why it's so important, is if you take the top 10 populous counties, our tax mill levy is down there at number 9 or number 10. So we're the largest, and we have the 9th or 10th level of taxing our constituents. So we are a low tax county, and that's part of our strategic plan. So people will want to say, we need more money for roads, or we need more money here. Well, okay, how are we going to balance it all out? Because that's the whole idea, that we want to make sure that we think about those people in the eastern end of El Paso County, just like we keep track of those people in Colorado Springs. They're all county residents, but they have a completely different need, and we try to balance that the best we can.
Yeah. And one of the things that I know that has been an important topic for you since you started on with the county about 6 months ago is wildfire preparedness and evacuation planning. Can you talk about why that was so significant? I know you mentioned being a part of the Waldo Canyon fire back in 2012. Is that what has really led you to champion that cause, as it were? Or, what else is part of that?
That is a primary reason. Having gone through a wildfire, and it basically destroyed in our neighborhood 346 homes. And then a year later, I believe it was close to 500 homes in Black Forest. So it's something that we have to live with now. And it's not a wildfire season. It used to be 3 or 4 months and maybe a shoulder season. But for those that have been around for a little while, the Marshall Fire in Boulder County, that was December 30th of 21, and over 1,000 structures were burned. And people go, well, that's not middle of summer. And there's a big difference between just a forest fire and then an urban fire or a wildfire that gets into an urban environment, and then it turns into a conflagration. And that's what we saw in Waldo, Black Forest, most recently in January in LA. Yeah. So dealing with the evacuation process and winning that battle with the development of large multifamily housing at that one critical intersection, that led me to understand how evacuation modeling is done. And it is completely different from your basic traffic engineering. So traffic engineering is a requirement in most cases, but evacuation planning is not. And so that was the biggest issue that we fought many battles with the city council on. And it was a major, plank, issue for me as far as running for a county commissioner, because I felt it was so critical that we have that modeling capability. And I'm very happy to say that on May 13th, our Pikes Peak Regional Office of Emergency Management announced that they had acquired a software program called Ladris, and they gave some good demos. It's going to take them about 3 or 4 months to really get up to speed. And it's just not OEM, it's all the fire districts and, your law enforcement, whether it's sheriff, whether it's police, within the city or even the towns. In my district, I'm lucky to have five towns or cities, Colorado Springs, Manitou Springs, Green Mountain Falls, Palmer Lake, and Monument. So all of those are kind of unique areas. And that's also one of the joys of being a commissioner, that they're in my district. But the evacuation planning is critical. And I was just at a meeting with Monument Town Council last night, and that issue came up. And so I got to announce to them that their fire district has been involved in the evacuation modeling tool, and that they'll be slowly rolling out in making it available to neighborhoods. In this case, it's kind of on that border between unincorporated El Paso County and the town of Monument off of West Baptist. So that is a pretty unique area where you've got hundreds of homes, if not even in the low thousands, and you have only 2 evacuation points. And then in some of them, you got a creek between. So at 200 and some homes all have a unpaved or unlined asphalt road. How are they going to get out? And it's not to be used as a planning tool per se, but it's primarily going to be used to help educate our first responders that if they had to evacuate, you've got this many people, and what we call a blue sky scenario where there's no impediments to evacuate, it's going to take X number of hours. And it's not minutes, it's hours to evacuate. So they need to understand that, and then they can start doing the tabletop exercises, or war gaming is another term that people might be familiar with. So they understand what they're up against. At the same time, every plan, at first initial contact will kind of go sideways. Yeah. But just having that ability to plan and run exercises and have options, you kind of know the base, and that is what is so important. So for the safety of basically the whole western side of El Paso County, which, for me, it's all my district, and it goes from Monument, County Line Road, all the way down to Fremont County off of 115. And that's heavily forested. Yeah. And that's critical. But it isn't just wildfire. It could be flooding. It could be some kind of other natural disaster. And, whether it's a chemical spill on the trains going right through town, what have you. It's just a great tool to understand what our first responders are going to be up against. And it's another tool.
So earlier you had mentioned how the sales roles you've had in the past have really helped you come along in your role as commissioner. Are there any other job experiences that you had that have helped you out in this role so far?
Well, as I stated, that in sales, it's, you have to provide a solution. But if you don't listen, you can't provide the correct solution. So almost any job I've had, it comes down to really understanding what the issue is. And you get to that point by listening to your customers. And in this case, as commissioner, it's going to be, listening to our citizens, our constituents. And I think it's just that confidence level because of the years of experience I have in many different facets, understanding okay, where do you stop the learning curve? That you don't want to get down to the weeds and everything, otherwise you can't move forward. And so it's utilizing the expertise that are there, and not trying to learn it all, but know where you need to go for help. And that was the same with part of the orientation that we had, that we had enough information, and every week or every month we get a little bit more. And that's the same in the my prior careers, that you just learn a little bit more, especially water business. Technology is just a different scale versus a private industry versus what utilities work with. So we're having that kind of background. So it's just being very varied, and having a broad scope. It's worked for me.
Yeah.
And some people be able to say, hey, I'm just going to be focused in this area. It's not that it's a bad thing, but I do have a very broad background that allows me to understand a lot of different things, whether it be housing, as a home inspector, multifamily, working with the USDA, building inspections, just you name it. So much of that. It just all kind of goes into that bank of knowledge, and then it's being able to tap into that knowledge.
Very good. And then we talked a little bit too about looking ahead, especially as it relates to residents, things they should be looking forward to. But for yourself, when you come to the end of your role as commissioner, whenever that might be, what are some of those impacts that you hope that you have made when the time comes?
I think the main hope is that the people in El Paso County have felt that they have been heard, and that we can take their concerns and issues to heart. You can never please everyone, but sometimes compromise is required, and other times you have to hold very strong. And public safety is one of those. And I'm a strong champion for public safety, whether that be part of the evacuation planning modeling that we just talked about, supporting the sheriff. I've got other things that I'd like to see, but I'm the rookie, so I have to pace myself a little bit and gain that credibility with some of these other entities within the county. So that I just don't get sloughed off as being the new kid. But, the goal is I think, to make sure that the public feels that they've been heard and you've given them their shot, so to speak.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So we have been able to cover a lot of ground so far, but before we close things out, I was just wondering if there's anything else that you want to add that you think would be important for listeners to know.
I think kind of tying it into, we talked a lot about the evacuation planning modeling, and that was one of my key items to get accomplished, and whether or not I had a direct impact, why I've been a commissioner, but I'll take the win because I've been fighting for it for 5 years. But the other is there's kind of some unique things that happen that you don't really know how it's going to impact you. El Paso County sponsored the Veteran of the Year just last month. And the gentleman was able to sit at the lunch table and talk with them before the program continued. And sometimes things have to be unscripted. And he made a comment about he was old enough to have fought in Vietnam. And it was like, wow. And then he started talking about how hard it was when he came home because the people just not appreciate. Versus, in 15 years, a huge change from Vietnam to the first Desert Storm war that we had. So my my talking points had nothing to say about Vietnam. So just you ad lib stuff. And it was so incredible to, in talking with Tom Miller, the recipient of the Veterans of the Year, how appreciative he was that I brought that up. And unfortunately, he was the only Vietnam vet in the room of, hundreds. But, it's little things like that that just kind of rock you to the core when you least expect it. And being able to capitalize on that on their behalf as a county commissioner is a wonderful feeling.
That's really great. That's a really great way to end things. I really appreciate you sharing that with us. Well, thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate you taking the time today and for all the work that you do for El Paso County. Look forward to the next at least 3.5 years. We'll see how things go, but appreciate everything that you've done so far and for all the work that you're doing to make this a great place to be. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Scott. I appreciate being here.
If you are interested in listening to additional episodes of Beyond the Dais, be sure to look for us on Podbean or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.